Just ahead on This American Land.
I don't think anyone can debate the science that the real problem with salmon is dams.
It is one of nature's most challenging journeys. Salmon returning inland from the ocean to spawn. But human demands have created barriers that threaten their life cycle, even their survival.
I drove 4,606 by road, plus 80 miles by raft.
Following the salmon's odyssey was one complicated assignment. Chris Milgate takes us behind the scenes of her months-long effort. For decades, a U.S.-Mexican agreement on Colorado River water provided for agriculture, industry, and cities, but it left out what was most important: the environment.
Living with a dead river has been sort of a wound.
Now scientists and volunteers are making new habitat, restoring native plants and animals. So hang on tight, we're all powered up. Time to make a splash with a new episode of This American Land. Funding for this program provided by the McKnight Foundation, the Walton Family Foundation, and the Horner Family Fund.
Hey everybody, and welcome to This American Land. I'm your host, Ed Arnett, and we've got some amazing stories for you today about the conservation of America's natural resources, our landscapes, waters, and wildlife, and the people who are dedicated to conservation. We'll start today in the Pacific Northwest with our contributor and wildlife filmmaker, Chris Milgate, who follows Chinook salmon on their 850-mile journey from the ocean to their spawning grounds in Idaho, encountering almost insurmountable obstacles in their way. I'll let Chris take it from here.
Thanks, Ed. Make a fist with your hand. Now point your index finger. That's how long Idaho salmon are when they flush to the ocean with spring runoff. They live in the Pacific Ocean for 2 to 3 years. They eat and they grow big. Now raise your whole arm. That's how big salmon are when they return to Idaho. They must navigate through all of us, 8 dams, 4 rivers, and 3 states to lay eggs once. Several thousand attempt to swim against the current for 850 miles, but only 3 dozen endangered Chinook salmon make it all the way to the finish line, deep in central Idaho wilderness. They return to where they were born. They lay eggs, then die, turning their crib into their grave. This is what the 850-mile migration route looks like, sounds like, feels like, for the fish and for the people of the Pacific Northwest.
Right now, ocean conditions is the biggest thing that I see that are not working for salmon. The ocean is changing, climate change is having an effect, as humans we're having an effect, and if the juveniles don't reach a productive ocean environment, they just become prey.
Once they come into the river, then they have to figure out what to do when they get to the dams. They have to find that flow coming out of the adult ladders, and they have to do that, 8 times.
Most people, like my family, didn't really see the conflict between fish and dams. Those stories of salmon and dams were just part of what I grew up with, the two of them together.
Flowing water creates power. You take the energy that's created from the falling water, you run it through turbines, they generate electricity, you send it through power lines that sometimes run hundreds of miles to make sure that everybody gets the electricity they need. You can't do what we've done here in the Northwest without environmental consequences.
The estimate for spring Chinook was like 40,000 spring Chinook returning to Bonneville Dam. That's low. I want to see double or triple that, and it scares me.
It's frustrating when we expect a certain amount of fish to come back and they don't. A good day, we would see a couple hundred salmon. And like a day like today, we saw 10.
I've been on the scaffold since I was about 8 years old. The best price for a Springer was about 10 years ago, and that was $8 a pound. It's gone downhill since then. You're not gonna get rich doing this. You're gonna get by.
We were salmon and steelhead fishing year round. That was probably up until maybe 5 years ago.
Yeah, that's a nice walleye.
Then we just don't have as many fish. And so now we fish walleye and bass and do a bunch of other stuff and try to bridge the gap.
There we go.
I have a love-hate relationship with walleye. They've saved my business, they've fed my family. But if I could have my pick, no, it would be salmon.
We are right on the banks of the Snake River. Anything that you see up and down this stretch of the river that's green is green because it's being watered with river water. Dams are just not something that you can just take away. What would happen is it would lower that water table to a point where we'd either have to drill our well or come up with a different system to divert the water.
We're 465 miles from the mouth of the Columbia River. The number one commodity that moves on the Columbia Snake River system is soft white wheat. For the Port of Lewiston, 98% of everything that we export is leaving here by barge.
Affordable transportation is one of the things that has helped the Northwest thrive, and I probably can't make money right now without the port.
If you couldn't barge out of here, what would you do? And more than likely, it'd end up on rail. Because it's just be too expensive to try to ever truck that. But understand there is no option for rail right now. The zeal to get something done is, well, let's just take these dams out and that's, going to be the silver bullet and everything's going to be okay. That's not the case. If just one of them is removed, that would end transportation this far inland to the Port of Lewiston.
4 of those dams in the lower Snake are actually blocking the best fish habitat. And that's why it's imperative that we talk about the 4 dams on the lower Snake being the highest priority for breaching or removal.
To represent removal of those dams or breaching of those dams and foregoing the electricity that's generated as those dams as easy to replace just isn't true.
It is that simple. We have spent over 30 years trying every solution to recover Chinook salmon except dam breaching. And we have not gained any ground.
Well, the salmon are in the river. Granted, their populations have had some pressure, but I can't see losing hydropower. It's as close to a no-brainer for society as I can think. The water's going to the ocean anyway, just capture some horsepower out of it.
I think they should go. Absolutely, 100%. The dam should go because the river was made to flow from headwaters to the ocean unimpeded. And with dams in place, I do not see a way that our fish can return to the way they were and the way they should be.
That is a complex proposition when you look at everyone who has to be involved in the breaching of dams. We've got to know a little more than I think we know right now to make that leap. Do you really want to take 1,000 average megawatts of electricity, which is enough power to light up the city of Seattle, with the risk associated with the abundance of fish?
You don't little bit breach a dam. I mean, you either do or you don't. And then once you do, it's still an experiment.
If the dams stay, I really think that's it. I think we need to make a decision whether we want salmon or those 4 lower Snake dams. It's pretty obvious that that's just a slow play to extinction, and that's unacceptable.
We have been referred to as the most successful program in the Columbia Basin. Half the fish that are caught in Idaho are rapid river fish. There would be no fishing for steelhead and salmon in Idaho without fish hatcheries. recreational things that come to this area are the lifeblood of the folks that live here.
Tourism is what's there, and salmon fishing is a major part of that.
There's mountains both ways, almost all the way down. It's really pretty. It's a good chance to get close to my family and get out and see nature, and it's a lot of fun. This is fun to go through and feel the rush of getting pulled by the water and chance of flipping.
When you first come to the Yankee Fork and you've never been here, it is quite a shock to see mountains and mountains of naked rocks. Obtaining precious metals like gold and silver were a part of the West growing up. And the mountains of rock that you see are the sign of that, are the legacy of that particular endeavor. Preserving the history of people in the Yankee Fork and development of the Yankee Fork is a very important part of our story, just like the fish being here are a very important part of our story. What we're doing in the Yankee Fork by restoring their habitat is giving them the space and the resources they need to just eat and survive and reproduce.
I started coming here when I was a small child in the early 1980s. You know, there was very few fish, and if someone heard or saw of a fish, it was kind of a big deal. People that came and lived in the salmon basin here were referred to as the Agaidika, which is the salmon eaters. To lose the Agai is to lose our identity.
You know, if we don't have it, then we have nothing to fight over anymore. And that's not a scenario I would want.
We have to be willing to entertain very tough questions like dam breaching.
America stands to lose clean, renewable hydropower. We stand to lose some irrigation and the water-based navigation. We stand to lose recreation opportunities.
You know, what a lot of people don't realize is all of that water that's running through the streets, down into the drains, under the cities, but eventually it's gonna make it into a river, and then it's gonna make it into the ocean. And then the salmon gotta swim through it.
It's really hard to live in the Northwest without caring about salmon. I'm not sure that America is ready for the extinction of salmon.
You just watched salmon migration from the ocean to Idaho. I'm the journalist who shot all that footage, and I had to shoot it alone. But I was never lonely. I didn't have time to be lonely. I was working alone because I followed disappearing salmon through the Pacific Northwest during the COVID-19 pandemic. At the time, none of us humans were moving, but the salmon were still moving, and I wanted to share their unbelievable 850-mile journey with you. So I asked myself, what's the safest, most responsible way to pull off the impossible during an impossible time for our planet? What I came up with worked, but it took a lot more out of me than I ever anticipated. This is the backstory.
We were all in isolation when the pandemic first blew up, so I knew this had to be a solo affair. No crew, just me and 5 cameras, heading straight to the Pacific Ocean, then following the fish back home to Idaho. I lived and worked in isolation out of a truck camper combo all summer while following salmon migration from the ocean to Idaho. Hi, I'm Chris Milgate, and I'm your field guide as we travel by truck and camper from the ocean to Idaho. I'd never been to the Oregon coast, so I had no idea what it looked like. But after seeing every mile of the river corridor across the state, I can honestly say the gorge is misty green gorgeous. And I have no idea what it looks like with people. I saw no one unless I was interviewing them, and even then we weren't close. I stayed 6 feet away, I wore a mask, I showed them my temperature chart, I carried disinfectant wipes. Wipe it off. I worked 15-hour days, then I parked at night to import footage, eat, and sleep. During the day, I shot underwater, overhead, and right at you. And when I wasn't shooting footage, I was driving, and driving, and driving. Salmon swim 850 miles of river from the ocean to Idaho. I drove 4,606 by road, plus 80 miles by raft. The dams are impressive, all 8 of them, and there's no getting around them without help. There are pipes and ladders to help salmon pass dams, and there's always some kind of hazing going on to keep predators from picking off fish. This is mile 146 of our 850-mile... During all of this travel, I rarely had access to a shower, so I wore a hat to hide my bad bedhead. That hat rubbed my ear, creating a sore that wouldn't heal. I came home every few weeks because I would get ahead of the fish on the migration route. So on one of my trips home, I had my doctor look at my ear. He didn't waste any time, skin cancer, and he took the top of my left ear. The fish fell apart on their migration journey, and I was falling apart. And it was obvious, so I had to address it. By mid-August, the fish were hanging around, but they weren't hooking up. They were waiting for something beyond our basic human instincts. I had everything but the final act at the final mile. I had to leave the watershed empty-handed. It was so disappointing, but I don't have control over what the wild does. I only have control over what I do. I had several injuries that needed attention, so I went home for surgery.
Female.
In early September, I received a text from the Shoshone-Bannock tribe researchers. They track reds. Reds are where salmon lay eggs. There were reds in the Yankee Fork of the Salmon River. And I'm so excited, it's like Christmas morning. When I finally see fin break the surface of the water, I stop. I don't speak. I don't move. I watch. Only 37 fish made it to the finish line. I'm looking at one of them. I know the risk it took to get here, and I know it's exhausted. I'm exhausted. And I know there's no other place this fish should be, and there's no other place that I should be. There's so much that goes into Mother Nature's migration from the Oregon coast to the Idaho wilderness. It's hard to believe that it even happens with all of us weighing heavy on the watershed with our own wants, but it does happen. And now we'll all see what it's like to live for one reason, and that is to swim for future's sake from the ocean to Idaho.
Now we'll go down to the southern border, following the Colorado River into Mexico, where it reaches the Sea of Cortez. Climate change has reduced the river's flow to barely a trickle, and we went to see how conservationists are finding ways to raise the river to restore habitats and wildlife.
The Colorado River, it's a shared resource between the U.S. and Mexico. There are more than 40 million people using water from the river every single day, including people from 7 states in the U.S. and 2 states in Mexico. My name is Gabriela Gonzalez. I'm a biologist, and I'm the Environmental Education Coordinator here at Sonoran Institute, Mexico. In 1944, the U.S. and Mexico signed this binational agreement where they decided all the river's water that goes into the country, into Mexico, was going to be used for agriculture, industry, and cities. And we left nothing for the environment. So since the 1940s until A few years ago, the ecosystem started degrading. We had no water on the river, and the native vegetation and native animals just disappeared. A 100 years ago, the whole Mexicali Valley used to be a big, lush environment with a big flowing river. And right now, what we see is less than 1% of that.
We are passing through a harsh time of rising temperatures and habitat degradation, habitat loss. My name is Carlos Restrepo. I'm the monitoring specialist of Sonoran Institute. There is much less water than before, and this is happening right now, and it will get worse in the near future because global temperatures are rising and the forecasts are not pretty good for anyone. The Colorado River represents the last stand in an arid land.
We are standing here about 40 miles south of the international boundary. My name is Jennifer Pitt. I am the Colorado River Program Director for the National Audubon Society, and we are part of the Raise the River Alliance. Behind me is an irrigation canal that is taking Colorado River water that's been diverted from the river into the irrigation canals, and here being returned to the river, allocated for the environment in a U.S.-Mexico diplomatic agreement to bring just a little bit of the river back for the birds that pass through this area as part of the Pacific Flyway, and of course for the local communities that live on top of effectively a dead river.
So this is Florencia, and she's showing her grandson, which they didn't know the river. And so this is an opportunity to bathe, and to recreate and make food with the family. He remembers the river when the water was abundant. And he recalls saying that it's not what it used to be.
For Mexico, living with a dead river has been, I'll say, sort of a wound. This is a little bit of repair. That said, it was not easy to get that U.S.-Mexico agreement. It was reached in the context of Mexico agreeing to do things like share in shortages with water users in Arizona and Nevada and California, and included a host of other measures, including having the U.S. provide significant funding to make water conservation improvements.
Where we're standing now is Laguna Grande, a riparian forest. What you see around here, it's what the river used to look like 100 years ago. But let's remember, we didn't have water for more than 60 years at this spot, and the river was nearly extinct. So thanks to nonprofits like Sonoran Institute and the other partners in the Raise the River Alliance, we have made possible the river coming back.
También por germinación.
So this is the cottonwoods. We are making new habitat. We are bringing back a bunch of different species. This is what's left over from a cottonwood that was downed by a beaver. Beavers are an indicator species. If we see beavers and we see a lot of other bird species, we can tell that restoration has worked. So Laguna Grande is a success story. We have proven that we can restore riparian ecosystems.
We are in the estuary area of the Colorado River Delta. It's a large floodplain.
But there are also other types of ecosystem along the Colorado River Delta, like the estuary. The estuary is where the river should meet the ocean. And right now, we are still working on restoring that ecosystem. We still need a lot of fresh water to flow on the river to be able to meet the Gulf of California. Water gives life to the ecosystems, to the plants, to the animals we rely on. We also have to understand that humans are not the most important species in the world. We have to consider the ecosystem as a Colorado River water user. This river is an example, and this project is an example of what is possible elsewhere. We are showing everyone in the US and Mexico and the world that restoration is possible and that native plants and animals are making a comeback.
And now, here's a quick look at stories from our next show.
These birds came back to our area and their life ended on a little 1/16 of an inch thick piece of glass.
Designing for a safe flight, how architects and homeowners can stop a clear and present danger from migrating birds.
What happens on your landscape does impact our bays and estuaries.
Texans realize they cannot have a robust economy without a healthy environment. Next time on This American Land.
That's all for now, and thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on This American Land.
For more information about this program, visit thisamericanland.org, listen to our podcasts, and like us on Facebook. Funding for this program provided by the McKnight Foundation, the Walton Family Foundation, and the Horner Family Fund.